Folks, the Dylann Roof trial got underway yesterday, and for the most part, I don't understand why this trial portion, okay, because there's two portions to this trial. This particular trial portion is already over. The prosecution is going to present a bunch of witnesses, obviously, that are going to testify to what happened. And the defense has already said that they may not even present a single witness. The defense is concentrating on the penalty phase of the trial, which is where they decide whether this person goes to jail for the rest of his life without any possibility of parole or gets the death penalty. So in my mind, what is going on right now basically is a waste of money. There should be some kind of an allowance to jump to the next phase. Now, the defense has already said that the state could save the money if they take the death penalty off the table. Actually, this is the federal trial. This is not the state trial. There's a separate state trial that is going to be convened after this trial is over, and they also have the death penalty on the table. So pretty much any which way you wash it, once this is all over, okay, because there is no defense for what he did, and the defense is not, the defense attorney are not trying to make a defense for the murder of the individuals. Their sole focus is trying to keep this guy alive. Now, what's going to probably end up happening here is, obviously he's going to be convicted of the murders in the federal case. And if he is in fact in the penalty phase, given a death penalty, this thing is going to be appealed like crazy, because there are various appeals that can be brought. So this guy is going to be around for quite some time. But ultimately, he is going to get the death penalty either here in the federal case or obviously in the state case, because he's already confessed to the murders. He's confessed. Basically, that should be all that they need to bring up is we just want to read his confession and we will rest our case. And then he's going to have to dispute his own confession, which obviously he can't, and then there'll be the weight of the federal conviction. So then they'll jump also to the penalty phase. So one way or the other, this guy is, I don't know how they do it in South Carolina, but one way or the other, this guy is going to see a needle, a firing squad, a gas chamber. He's going to see something. And the people will finally get justice. And hopefully it will be fairly quickly, given the lack of appealability that he should have.
South Carolina in Charleston, testimony will begin in the trial of Dylann Roof. Of course, the man of the white supremacist who shot and killed 9 African Americans at Emmanuel AME Church last year. Of course, we went through jury selection. His lawyers tried to get this trial delayed. The judge said no. Testimony will start, folks, with Felicia Sanders, who repeatedly called the 22-year-old suspect evil, as she described the shooting. Sanders talked about how members of the church welcomed Roof during Bible study in June of 2015. She initially thought the gunfire was an electrical problem, but they discovered Roof was shooting at everyone. Sanders' son was among the 9 killed in the shooting. Now, Roof faces 33 charges, including committing a hate crime resulting in death and obstruction of religion resulting in death. Roof could face the death penalty if convicted. Now, there are no cameras allowed in the federal courtroom during this trial. Joining me right now via FaceTime in Columbia, South Carolina, is Meg Kennard, the political and legal affairs reporter for the Associated Press. She is covering this particular trial. Meg, we've had some, first of all, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
We've had, of course, some testimony. First of all, we had legal back and forth when it came to jury selection. Dylann Roof not wanting his attorneys, then wanting his attorneys, then bringing his attorneys back. But now comes the hard part, having to hear the survivors recount what took place in that Bible study room.
That's right. Yesterday, as you described, we heard first up from Felicia Sanders, one of the 3 survivors from the shootings last June at Emmanuel AME. And her testimony, to say it was grueling and heartbreaking, is a drastic understatement. She lost her son in the shooting, she lost her aunt in the shooting, and she spent heart-wrenching, probably what seemed like hours, but was only minutes, shielding her own granddaughter from the fire. It was heartbreaking to hear her testimony and to hear from her loss. There were a lot of emotions expressed in the courtroom. Some of the jurors were seen dabbing their eyes as they heard it and as they left for a break. And we can only imagine there will be more of this to come from other survivors and relatives of those lost.
This is a weird trial in the sense that did the defense attorney, I was reading one of the accounts, pretty much say, my guy did it?
We see this sometimes in capital cases, although you're right, it still can be thought of as a little bit unusual. Yesterday, in the opening statements, David Bruck, who is the lead defense attorney for Dylann Roof, stood up and said that he didn't dispute a lot of things that the prosecution had said about his guilt in the shootings and about the incidents themselves. We see this sometimes in that defense attorneys will be focusing more on what's called the penalty phase. If Dylann Roof is convicted, the penalty phase will be the second part of this trial, where the jury will determine whether he gets a life sentence or a death sentence. And David Bruck essentially said yesterday he's already looking toward that part of the trial. The judge several times admonished him to stay focused on the guilt phase, which is still technically where we are right now. As you'll recall, Dylann Roof, through his lawyers, has already offered to plead guilty if a death sentence were not a possible option. Prosecutors are still leaving that open. They are pursuing the death penalty, so they have not been willing to accept his plea, and so here we are. But even though we just had opening statements yesterday, the defense team is already looking toward the next part of this.
First of all, how long do they expect this trial to last? Because, and also for our audience, this is the federal trial. This is not a federal murder trial. He's been charged on hate crime laws, correct?
Correct. There were 33 federal counts, including hate crimes and obstruction of the practice of religion. Dylann Roof will still, unless something changes, face a separate death penalty trial in state court on 9 counts of murder, along with some other things. In the federal case, prosecutors have said they believe it'll take them around 7 days to present their case. We already heard from half a dozen or more witnesses yesterday. There'll be more to come, so things are moving along fairly swiftly in that respect. As we already mentioned, David Bruck, the defense attorney, is already focused on the next phase. For the guilt phase, he says he might not even put up much of a case at all. We don't know yet how much the next part of this, if Dylann Roof is convicted, will last, but it could mean that this part of the trial is pretty quick.
And after this, so the state will wait to try him after the federal decision is rendered, correct?
That's right. There was a lot of scheduling back and forth between the state and the federal government over whose trial would go first. But as you and I have talked about previously, Charleston just went through another major high-profile trial of former police officer Michael Slager in the shooting death of Walter Scott. The same prosecutor handling that case in state court is also the prosecutor who would be handling the case against Dylann Roof in state court. So she has had a lot on her plate. No doubt the Slager trial and all of that went into scheduling for the Roof case, but it's still technically docketed for early next year in state court.
All right, Meg Kennard, Associated Press, covering the Dylann Roof trial there in Charleston, South Carolina. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, so you got the basic details on what's going on with the Dylann Roof case. So let's see what happens. You know, right now we're not 0-4 at this point. We're 0-0 with a tie on the Michael Slager situation. Let's see where we know we're going to win on the Dylan Roof case. It's just a question of how big is the win going to be.